Welcome into another edition of Johnny Torch Reviews. Today we're taking on Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Welcome to the show, no matter who, what, or where you be. And the show went off the final episode a couple of weeks ago. And what I usually like to do is try to do like a second viewing of the show before I commit to reviewing it. But again, a lot of times you wait too long and people are not going to be interested in hearing what you thought. So I'm going to just do like 10 bullet points I put down of stuff that I want to make sure I touch on randomly and kind of out of order, just to make sure that we've approached this show properly and talked about it. Now, as usual, first, I'm going to give a little bit of history. I've reviewed every single season of this show from the first season back on Netflix. You can find all those reviews on my channel still. And it was one of my earliest reviews, the first season of the Netflix version of the show. And I was not a huge fan of the show on Netflix. Now, the viewing public seems to be split into two camps, which is what always happens when you have sort of a disconnect between, the old guard and the new guard, because this show technically has been brought back by Disney. Some like the new format and some of the changes. Others like the way it was done. I was not a huge fan of the show. They sort of minimalized the costume. He had the black sweat togs. Didn't really have a legitimate costume until the last episode of the first season. Again, this is what they call a textbook surf Dracula. Second season I thought was good. I liked the stuff with the Punisher. It kind of petered out when they did Elektra in the Hand. I wasn't too crazy about that because it wasn't very comic accurate. Daredevil and Bullseye are supposed to sort of clash because of Elektra, and that is never going to happen in the show because of it. Instead, they use Foggy, which is not a real good substitute. But again, the fault lies with Netflix for doing the show that way. And I wasn't really a fan of them not really showing the radar sense too well. I know that this Disney version doesn't particularly do the radar sense that well either. They do, I think, focus on his abilities a little bit more. They, sort of spotlight when he's using the augmented hearing and the running his fingers over the paper to read and stuff like that. It's a little bit more noticeable, I guess, in the Disney show. Of course, season 3, again, we went back with Defenders in season 3, again, minimalizing the costume. A lot of what they call navel gazing, people doing heartfelt conversations that last on and on and on. And there could be a whole episode without any action whatsoever. There might be some of that still, traces of that in the Disney show. Last season, particularly. This season was a big step up from last season, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. So, again, season 3 introduced Bullseye. He was sort of the imposter Daredevil. Things were going on to sort of set up a 4th season, and then the show was canceled. Defenders, of course, in the midst of all this, was also Matt meeting up with the other Netflix heroes who were Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Danny Rand. And honestly, I have vague memories of all those shows because I watched each season twice. Because, like I said, I kind of want to internalize it and really, let it wash over me instead of just sort of watching it and then disposing of it. But very few episodes have I gone back to. I mean, I've gone back to like the Punisher portion of Daredevil season 2, maybe 1 or 2 episodes of the first season, 1 or 2 episodes of the third season. I didn't remember any of Defenders. And honestly, the problem is that, again, they've minimalized so much the comic book aspect, and they made the story so introspective. I guess I'm sort of blowing the lead here that I wasn't a huge fan of the show in the Netflix era. But this is the reason why. I mean, I feel like on Disney, you've got a chance to actually show some exciting visual action here for Daredevil. He is a swashbuckler. I always say this. I'm sure I've said it on other reviews of Daredevil, but he should be depicted as such. He's a swashbuckler. He is an acrobat. The name Daredevil suggests that he's diving off of buildings and swinging on the billy club. And we've gotten little of that throughout all the incarnations of Daredevil, but of this, Netflix / Disney incarnation, but they have upped the action significantly in Disney. Now, came Born Again last season, and a lot of people were complaining, and in a sense, it's a legitimate complaint, because what they did last season was to cobble together sort of a Frankenstein of when Disney sort of committed themselves to doing Daredevil on Disney Plus. They really wanted to just take Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio and redo the whole show without Karen, without Foggy, without any ties to the Netflix shows, meaning probably no Frank, probably no Jessica Jones and other characters. And they just sort of wanted a clean but soft reboot, so that what came before kind of happened before, but it's not really a continuation of the show. Now, people complained about that, and everybody knew that that was a recipe for disaster, because everybody grew to love Karen and Foggy and the whole situation. They actually recast the actress who played Vanessa, which was a very strange choice. I mean, if that other actress was there and willing to do it, I don't know why you wouldn't let her do it. But again, it made no sense, and fans were kind of grimacing that this was even going to take place. So I'm guessing this was, I think, around the COVID era, and production stopped. They halted for a while to be able to figure out what to do. And in the interim, luckily, a mixture of, I think, Charlie Cox, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Kevin Feige all met together to sort of process what was happening, screen the episodes they had filmed up to that point, which I think was roughly a third of the show, and figure out what was wrong, because it wasn't working, and they knew it. To their credit, they knew it. So they rejiggered a lot of the episodes and completely shot, I think, 2 or 3 new episodes to bookend the show. A new episode at the beginning, 2 new episodes, I think, at the end, if I remember correctly. Foggy was still to die, unfortunately, but, and again, this was sort of their death of Elektra for the show. I mean, I really didn't want to see Foggy die, but if they had killed Elektra the way they were supposed to with Bullseye, you'd have more of a premise here that was comic accurate. But again, you kind of had the bed made for you, and you have to play the cards as they fall. So they brought back Foggy to kill him in the first episode, and we kind of put Karen on the bus, and they built around the premise that for the 4th time in the series, Matt didn't want to be the Daredevil. He was retired. He refused to get into action. We'd already gone through this, I think, at least 3 times. I think this was the 4th time, because he was struggling against the goad. At least I remember in Defenders, he didn't want to be Daredevil. In Daredevil season 3, he didn't want to be Daredevil. In Daredevil season 1, I think there was, a few episodes there where he was not sure he was going to continue on. So, I mean, this was something that had been played out over and over and over again. And finally, they sensed that this was the wrong direction. He was going to go back into costume at some point in the first season anyway, but they tried to give a reason for it and bring that to the forefront, so to speak. So it's because of Foggy's death. He's with Heather Glenn now instead of Karen, and he's got a new law partner, Kristen. He's got an ex-cop friend who was Cherry was his name. And, we sort of carried on from there. And then we were introduced to a few new characters on the Kingpin side. They renewed the rivalry, and we were set to go. But all last season was essentially a build up to this season. Now, does this season make good the build up that we've been going through? Arguably for 4 seasons, but at least for last season, because a lot of people complained there wasn't enough action, there wasn't enough stuff going on. I still enjoyed it for what it was, but yeah, it obviously was not the goal. It wasn't the bottom line. And I would say, unreservedly, without a doubt, this season is better and much better than most of the Netflix series. There's still some parts, like I said, season 2 with Punisher. There's some parts of season 3 I like that are up at the same level as this. But I think this is probably the best season. We have Matt as Daredevil literally almost in every episode. Now, again, a lot of the show has been lambasted and criticized, and it's quite frustrating because the usual suspects really want to pick on this show because they want to piggyback on the discontented Netflix fans. And it's the same thing with everything. It's like Star Wars. You have the original trilogy fans. The prequel trilogy wasn't up to their standards. In my own personal case, it's like Genesis, Peter Gabriel era versus Phil Collins era. You always have people that are unable to adapt with the change, and that since it's not exactly a carbon copy of what came before it, they're not going to accept it. So the usual suspects feed off of that, and you have them online constantly decrying nobody's watching the show, and it's not going to last without viewers and this and that. But when you also look on Twitter, the show has a very strong following, a very vocal following. And this kind of reminds me of the CW shows, Arrow, Flash, and all that, where they didn't really set the Nielsen ratings on fire. And yet they were allowed to continue on for literally a decade in most cases. I mean, a lot of them ended only because the star wanted to leave. And then at a certain point, CW was sold, and that probably would have brought an end to it anyway. But between, say, Smallville running 10 seasons and Arrow running, I forget what it was, 7, Flash running 9, I think Supergirl ran 6 or 7. To not give Daredevil the benefit of the doubt here on a streaming channel where Disney's got more money than they know what to do with. They'll be able to keep this show going as long as they want. And I think as long as there is people watching, that their future is safe. I think we've got them. We already have them, we know, because for season 3, because this was envisioned as originally the first season was envisioned as, I believe, an 18 episode first season. And when they retooled it, they decided to cut it in half and pick up the second half. Now, when they picked up the second half, which was like the back end, which is what it's usually called for a second season, now they're going to do a legitimate follow-up season. So again, this show probably will last a long time if the particulars involved, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio, are interested in keeping it going. Now, a lot of the usual suspects, we'll talk about them as the show goes on, but one of the complaints is Daredevil isn't in it enough. Well, that's not really the case. I mean, like I said, Matt is in costume in this season probably more than all 3 seasons of the Netflix show combined, including Defenders, probably including last season's Born Again, because the only season that had him in the red and, in this case, red and black togs were the second season, really. He was never in his costume all season like he was here. Now, the storyline has it that he's basically leading a revolution alongside Karen because Wilson Fisk is, of course, the Kingpin, taking over New York as the mayor. And he's running roughshod over everyone. Of course, this brings up a lot of controversy also, like where is Spider-Man, where is, the Defenders, and where are all the New York superheroes, which there are probably 530 of them that are not around to deal with this problem. And there's no clear answer for that. I mean, I suppose, you know you can come up with something, but it's up to Daredevil to sort of lead a revolution against the government. Now, this is also where a lot of the usual suspects have poo-pooed the show, because the metaphor obviously is that Fisk is Trump and the AVTF is the ICE agency, and they're cracking down on vigilantes the same way. And it's not really, it's like martial law. It's not really a legitimate legal operation. And they're trying to compare that with, you know, Trump is Fisk. But to be honest with you, I don't feel like it's as heavy-handed as all that, because they do have a lot of that stuff in the middle, like White Tiger's, uh, what was it, his sister? I guess it's Baby White Tiger's mother. Let's put it that way. And she gets arrested because she's sticking up for someone trying to prevent their store from being robbed, and she is sort of locked up in these cages with the anti-vigilante task force dungeon with the swordsman and a few of the others. And people are taking this to be very heavy-handed, like sort of the kids in cages thing. I didn't really see that as much. I mean, I could tell that it was heavy-handed in a sense, but I feel like the usual suspects even admit that it's really a reversal of January 6th at the end of the season, where everybody revolts against Fisk and the people all come together as one to complain and want to oust Fisk. But if you take that metaphor to its logical conclusion, it would make Biden Fisk, and he was the illegitimate president that we knew he was, and that January 6th should have been carried out the way it was here, where everybody sought to oust him, and the powers that be would ultimately arrest Fisk. That's not exactly what happens to Fisk, but we'll get to that at the end of the review, but the end of the season. All right, so again, I liked a lot of the action. Daredevil was in it a lot, but the problem was, the reason why I didn't feel like he was in it as much as he should have is because they were still dealing with the characters that were brought in from the last season. You had Kirsten, Cherry, Heather, Buck, and Daniel. All these characters needed to vie for some time because they didn't just write them out. They wanted to do something with them. And I think that's a credit to them, to not just be like, all right, we screwed up. We tried to do another show that nobody wanted, and all these people will just go away and never hear from them again. I don't think really that's the way you do it if you're a creative person. Now, of course, the drop off there to that is that, well, we're getting less time for the hero, but at the same time, we're doing something interesting with some of the other characters to varying degrees. Now, I'm going to go down the list and go through all of them. First off is obviously Cherry. He doesn't get a whole lot to do. The idea at the end of the last season was he was going to build up, Daredevil was going to build up sort of a posse to sort of take down Fisk and lead the resistance and so forth. Everybody thought that was going to be, Jessica Jones, Heroes for Hire. That didn't materialize, but Cherry was sort of part of the band. He ends up having a health scare, a heart attack, when the AVTF tries to take him out, and he's sort of sidelined. That's their kind of way of putting him on the bus. He comes back at the end. Kirsten really doesn't have a lot to do here. And a lot of people I've seen complain about that. I'm surprised, because she's really not that important to the show. I mean, she's basically carrying the legal side. She's maintaining the firm, so to speak, while Matt is what he's doing. And people are like, well, she should have been surprised to see that he was Daredevil at the end of the show. I'm like, I really don't give Kirsten a second thought, really. I mean, she's a fine actress. She's perfectly fine in the role. And I mean, I think she carries out what the story sort of needs her to do and needs her to be. But I've never really felt like, gee, I wish Kirsten had more screen time. Um, then we go to some of the other characters. Heather is sort of put on the back burner because she's being built up for season 3. Now, of course, I think it goes without saying spoiler warnings here, but just in case you don't want to know anything about the show, it's probably too late now. But so Heather is going to become Muse, and she is really in the bag for Fisk from the beginning of the season on, and she's like falsifying records on Swordsman so that he'll go to prison, and she's apparently going to do the same thing to Karen. And the problem with Heather's story is also one of the benefits of it being on Disney, which is if this were on Netflix, Heather would have had like 3 stories all to herself, 3 episodes all to herself, where they go into her psychology and they'll show flashbacks to her in college and how she's kind of messed up. And this is the reason why she's sort of taking this the wrong way. What happened to her, the PTSD that she's carrying from the Muse attack. But in this, it's basically hand waved that we understand. All right, Muse tried to kill her. She killed him, and now she's a little nuts. That's basically all they give you. Now, for me, that's fine. Other people might have wanted the long, drawn out navel gazing and backstory. And, well, she was, when she was 21, she really had this problem, and it kind of affects where she is now. And I don't need any of that. All we really get here is that she wants to steal an earring from Vanessa's jewelry box, which I didn't understand. She has this weird scene with Buck where Buck is sort of trying to, I don't know, unburden her from her homicidal tendencies by trying to strangle him. Very odd, but I don't know if this is Buck trying to channel her anger or trying to help her. Does he want her to sort of be a psycho killer? We don't really know. And I feel strange that the show doesn't really let you know what way that's going to be. And like I said, this kind of goes under the radar for the whole season up until the last act, where we see that she dons the mask of Muse, which for some reason she got a hold of. Either that or she made a new one. And the idea is she sees herself in the mirror and she sees herself as herself when she has the Muse mask on. And somehow this is going to make her Lady Muse, and this is going to somehow, I guess, make her a psycho killer or something. I mean, I don't know the comics, the modern day comics. I really haven't read much of Daredevil. I haven't read much comics at all in the last 20 years. I mean, I suppose my last foray into Daredevil in comics was the Ann Nocenti run, which of course was, I think, universally praised. I'm pretty sure that was a good run. And that was like, what, the mid 90s, I think. I don't know. But that's kind of a more, more recent development, I think, Muse. All right, so let's talk a little bit. I want to get through most of these characters here. Mr. Charles, played by Matthew Lillard. Now, this was a really interesting character to me when we first start out with him. He seems to have a lot of weight behind him. And he's kind of a slick yet slimy character. He's, very sure of himself, very unafraid, and he's able to stand up to Kingpin and get him to sort of play ball with him. Now, it's revealed very subtly that he works for, I'm forgetting her name, Julie Louise-Dreyfus. What's her name? Valenta or something from Thunderbolts. And the idea is that he sort of commands this kind of power because he's got her behind him. And of course, if you haven't seen Thunderbolts, she's a pretty powerful figurehead in government. Sort of, I guess, a paper pushing version of what Nick Fury was to the Avengers is what she is to Thunderbolts. Halfway through the show, Kingpin sort of strikes back on him, and it like changes things for him entirely. And he's like much more ducking and covering and running for cover. I kind of question why they did that. I mean, I know you want Fisk to be the main villain and not sort of cower to a guy like Matthew Lillard, but in a way, it really took all the teeth out of that character, and he sort of just, I don't know, he I want to say fades away in the show, and I felt like he could have been more. They could have done more with him. Halfway through, I want to say maybe in the last quarter, they brought in Jessica Jones again. I've never been a huge fan of Jessica Jones. I saw the first season of her show, which was good. I think it was basically the strength of David Tennant being the Purple Man made that like a more interesting show than it probably really was, because Jessica Jones is really sort of like, I just call her like angry girl, and she's pretty strong. I mean, that's kind of her power. She's cranky and she's strong. And they kind of give us the backstory here, a little bit of what happened since the show. I haven't seen. I think there's 3 seasons of her show, and I don't know where they left it. I know at some point she, which was also in the comics, she gets, I guess, married to Luke Cage, or hooks up to some extent, where she has a child with Luke Cage, and that kid is now like 6 or 7 years old, which I guess because it happened in real time from the end of the Netflix series and here. And her powers are wonky. She helps Daredevil in a pretty good action scene, but unfortunately her powers start fading out when she needs them, and she can get punched and so forth. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what they're going to do with that. They suggested that because of childbirth, it's set her powers off and made them a little wonky. I don't really know what they're planning to do with that, but she was fine in this. Like I said, I don't dislike her. I don't dislike Kristen Ritter, I think is the actress, but I just feel like a lot of people sort of build her up to be like more interesting of a character than she really is. But for what she had to bring to the table here, it was fine. We get the cameo of Luke Cage at the end, and of course, I guess we'll talk more about this at the end of the video. But there's some suggestions of what's going to happen in season 3, and we'll talk about that. We get the episode with Foggy, which it plays to Matt's moral dilemma, and that leads into what happens with Karen this season. Now, Karen is training to like help Daredevil, and this is another thing that's driven me crazy as well. Also, when you see every single time, the usual suspects. Oh, Karen is walking in front of Daredevil. That tells you everything you need to know about the show. Just shut up, will you please? It's so disingenuous, because if you watch that episode, Karen was leading Daredevil to I think the prisoner that they took out, she took out, which was some AVTF soldier or agent or whatever, and yeah, she's gonna have to lead him to the guy if she captured the guy. You know what I mean? It's not being disingenuous and acting like, oh, this is what the whole season's about. And speaking of that, there's like 2 scenes in the whole show where Karen actually takes out an AVTF agent, and there's one in the middle of the season, I think it is, and that's basically because the guy wants to defect, and he doesn't really fight back, and she just beats him up and takes him prisoner. And then at the end, when they're staging the whole coup and everything, she sneaks up on a guy, he turns around, and then she like does 3 or 4 judo chops on him and takes him out, knocks him out with a rifle. And of course, this sparked, furor online, with the nerdrotics and all those idiots who are like, oh, see, Karen is taking over the show. No, I know what you wanted is to have Karen not be in the show, and you wanted there to be no women. But unfortunately, for you at least, that Karen Page is an important part of the Daredevil lore. And I'm of the opinion that it was the biggest mistake of all that Frank Miller did all he did in his series, and then she was ended up killed off under Kevin Smith. And I don't know if they ever went back and changed any of that, but they really ruined Karen's character. And if in this show it's remembered for doing nothing else, it's for actually making Karen Page a legitimate character that deserves to be looked up to. And this show has done that, and Deborah Ann Wall has really brought her to a new height and a new legitimacy that I think that there wasn't before. Now, again, what did you expect? She's supposed to stay in the room and just lock herself in a room. She's been training with a superhero for like 6 months. They show you at the beginning of the season that she's training on a wooden dummy with Daredevil. And this goes on for like 3 or 4 episodes that you see her doing this. Does this mean you thought that she was never going to fight anybody? Can you use that thing that is what passes for a brain in your head? She was training for this. And she's been around, Daredevil and Punisher for the better part of like a decade now. And she's a co-leader in a revolution. And you don't think she should be able to take down one mook who had his head turned? I mean, this is where it just drives me crazy that this is where we are now with film criticism, with television criticism. We've got these idiots trying to grift and sell a bill of goods to people when anybody with a brain can tell you what is what with these shows. What is what with the idea of Karen. What they didn't do was make her take down a group of 5 guys that were heavily armored, that were 3 times her size. I'm sure the show writers heard that complaint several times in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and name any of the last decade's worth of shows. And people complained about that. Why is that happening? That shouldn't happen. That doesn't happen here, and you're still not happy. You're never going to be satisfied. There is a segment of fandom that will never be satisfied, and the usual suspects are the grifters that play to that segment of quote-unquote fandom. And again, it is very frustrating to have to put up with that. And hopefully at some point, film criticism, television criticism will stand up for itself and actually turn these jokers away, and they'll become as irrelevant as they really are, because the grift can't go on forever. They're trying to live off the woke era, even when the woke era is gone. It's dead and buried, and they'll still be doing this. Now, to continue on with the Karen and Matt relationship, that's coming up, abundantly in this season. And the interesting thing is to see where they become at odds. There's a really good scene. There's a really good part in the story. There's a significant event where Daredevil captures Bullseye and takes him to the lair, which is kind of similar to what Karen did with the agent. But Karen just wants to kill Bullseye because he killed Foggy. Now, Matt is like on the fence here. Now, they don't really play up too much of the religious dilemma he's in. They to their credit, they do a couple of times show that, I think, but he will not allow himself, because he's Daredevil, of course, to take the law into his own hands and kill Bullseye. And we hear a lot of talk about how he's sort of trying to extend grace to his enemies. He wants them to be able to, sort of find some kind of redemption and just like back away, turn away from what you're doing and go the other way. And I won't have to deal with you anymore, and you won't have to deal with me anymore. Daredevil makes this kind of overture to both Bullseye and Kingpin. We'll get back to the Kingpin in a minute, but let's finish the Bullseye storyline. And so Karen wants to kill Bullseye. And I thought that because Matt leaves the room, and I thought that Karen was not going to be able to go through with it because she's not like Frank. But Daredevil actually has to stop her from killing Bullseye, because she does have that Frank in her. You know what I mean? She does have that element in her, and she really, it was a really great scene that I wish went on a little longer, because it would have been good. Again, that's kind of what the Disney formula is, so to speak, is that they don't let the scenes breathe too much. And so it would have been nice if we got a little more of that back and forth, but she's like, you're helping people that hurt you more than the people that care about you. You hurt the people that love you when the people that hurt you, you're trying to give them the benefit of the doubt and grace and save them. And that's an interesting place to be because Karen is not as, well, for lack of a better term, religious as Matt is. And so this makes perfect sense to Matt. I mean, he's sort of struggling with it himself, but he can find it within himself to do this where Karen can't. And I felt like they could have played on that a little bit more, but I suppose they were afraid it was going to drive a wedge between them. And there really isn't this season. They basically are on the same page, but they come to that point where she does want to kill Bullseye, and she doesn't really understand why Matt can't make that final step the way Frank would. There's been some debate on whether Frank would let her or whether he would do it himself. He probably would have done it himself, I think, but Matt certainly wasn't going to let her. And so, I think it's a great progression of the relationship of these two, the way they've done it, and they're keeping that relationship growing, which is something I like. Let's get to some more of these things. One more side character I want to touch on, of course, is Baby White Tiger. We see her in the show here. She's like 13 years old, and she's like working undercover for BB. We'll talk about them in a minute. And I feel like I thought it was important for her to sort of fulfill her character obligations this season. And I think she did. Now, I don't think we really need to go back to her next season. I think they can probably leave the character alone now. But I do feel like we've seen her. She had the amulet on. She was doing some fighting. She was actually a little vicious. I was expecting Daredevil to sort of hone her in, but he doesn't. But I mean, they could spin her off into something else if they're ever going to do sort of a Young Avengers or whatever project they've been saying they're going to do for a long time. If they want to fold her into that, fine. But I don't think they really need her still in this next season because, again, we have to thin the herd a little bit. They brought back, what's his name? Brett Mahoney in the last episode or two. I think you can see him here in this picture. So again, that's all the side characters. There's a lot of them, and I don't think you really need so many. So again, like I said, they probably can start minimalizing the importance of some of them at least. That's probably a thing. Before we put before we put a pin in the characters, let's go to Kingpin and Vanessa. We'll get their whole storyline out for the show this season. All right, so we all know that the big thing was in this season Vanessa's death, and Kingpin stages a boxing exhibition, which I found very strange. They really don't explain why he's doing this. The inference, for the people that are, in the know is that he's trying to draw out Bullseye and Daredevil and sort of get them both off his back by getting them both, killed when they show up to this boxing match. But I mean, I don't understand what the people of New York think. I mean, is that like having your local mayor step in the ring and you're like, hey, let's go down to the Centrum, honey. We've got the mayor is going to be taking on some washed up boxer. I didn't really understand how they sold that to the to the people, but all right. So he's doing a boxing match, and then Bullseye comes in. Bullseye wants to take out Kingpin, and this is the character arc of Bullseye that they've chosen for him. Which, again, Bullseye in the comics is just a mad dog. He's the Joker. You know what I mean? There's nothing funny about him really, but he has no compunction about just going out there and killing people. And it doesn't matter to him who he kills. If you put someone in front of him that is in his way, he's just going to kill them. And they had the whole diner scene that was great, which shows him taking out all kinds of officers and agents or whatever. And it was really good. So they gave him some choice material here. And I think that actor is really good. Wilson Bethel, I think is his name. He's very good. And I really want to see him continue on in this role. The suggestion is that maybe he's going to get a comic accurate costume next time. At the end of the season, he goes poser. There's a guy dressed like him with like a more bluish costume. Speaking of costumes, let me just say this right off the bat. I thought Daredevil's costume was great this season. The red D's you could see, and it started out black and then it started fading. Now I'm a fan of just the red Daredevil costume, but I was told that this is kind of what they were trying to do, that in the comics the dark shading of his costume looks black. So essentially in the comics, he looks like he looks here, where it's like black in certain areas and red in others. And a lot of people are complaining because a lot of the scenes that we've seen in trailers or behind the scenes stuff never made it to the actual show. I mean, they don't really show why he's got the costume looking like that, how he did it, why the DD is there, which I think it's basically meant to be like a rallying cry for revolution. You see the DD, Daredevil's been here, one of those things like Batman and the Dark Knight Rises. But getting back to Bullseye, so Bullseye ends up killing Vanessa. Kingpin told her not to show up. She shows up at the boxing match. I knew as soon as she was wearing white that she was going to be covered in blood. And, what ends up happening is that she survives the attack initially. I mean, what happens is the statue or whatever it is, the little item that he's holding, breaks and the glass goes all over the place and a shard gets planted in her head. And that pretty much is what ends up killing her. Now, Bullseye is interesting. Again, he's not like the comic Bullseye, because the comic Bullseye had many problems. I think he had a brain tumor. He was just crazy. He was a hitman that sort of liked the job too much, and because he was so good at it that he just kept going. And this is not that. They're trying to give him something of a storyline. And the storyline really is that Vanessa hired him in order to get him out of prison. He took the deal to kill Foggy. Now he's kind of remorseful because he was being used by Vanessa and Fisk, and he's still a patsy. He doesn't get a get out of jail free card. He's going to still be on the run. And he killed an innocent guy, and he wants revenge. So he wants to kill them for making him do what he did. And so to him, to be free is to do that. And he wants to clear his debts. He wants to clear his ledger, as I guess Black Widow would say. And he does this in his mind by killing Fisk or Vanessa, and Vanessa's killed. Fisk's reaction to this, it was a well acted scene by Vincent D'Onofrio, of course. Fisk's reaction is actually kind of mild compared to what I thought it was going to be. A lot of people were thinking he was going to be on a rampage and go to war and this and that. He's kind of just hiding up in his tower after this. He kills the doctor because the guy was insufferable. But apart from that, he really doesn't seem to act out as much as everybody thought he was going to. So ultimately, Matt gives Bullseye a chance at redemption by saving the governor from Fisk's assassination attempt. And before we get to the final close of the show, the last two episodes were really crazy. Let's talk also about the BB, Blake, Buck trifecta, which is very interesting because BB is running this is the niece of Ben Urich, who was killed by Fisk back in the first season of Daredevil. Now, I don't mind really that they want to go back to that and try to milk some of that, because they honestly killed Urich way early in the Daredevil lore. I don't know if he was ever killed off in the comics, in the current run, but I know that, Urich is sort of his, I don't want to say Commissioner Gordon, but, he's kind of, goes to him for information sometimes to sort of see how things are settling. BB has been sort of behind the scenes trying to get information, and she does these podcasts where she mocks Fisk in a Fisk mask, and she is basically using Daniel Blake, who is son of the Sopranos guy. She's basically using him to get information, and Fisk is getting upset with this, and they kind of get wise that the leak is probably coming from Daniel. So they sort of set him up to catch her. And, they set her up basically to believe a lie where, because Blake tells her something, oh yeah, Vanessa's at the hospital. And then the next thing you know, the news reports know that Vanessa's in the hospital. So they give her some false information, and she never really gets a chance, I don't think, to broadcast it. But at this point, Buck is going to kill BB. Now, Blake has been on thin ice as it is because he's kind of sheltering BB. And then the funny thing is I don't really even see them as a couple. They don't really seem to be in love. I mean, they just seem to be like friends. And he seems pretty committed to her. Um, and it's very strange because you could honestly almost see it as a brother and sister relationship, and in a way I like that because it's like, oh, it's too easy. He's in love with the girl. He's going to do whatever he can to protect her. But in a way, he doesn't really even seem to be romantic. He just sort of kind of like wants to brag to her that, yeah, I'm climbing the ranks. You see, I can get, tickets to the game and this and that. I mean, he doesn't really seem like a guy that's trying to get a girlfriend or trying to impress a girlfriend. He's sort of just trying to brag and sort of gets his jollies by seeing her reaction to his bragging about all the stuff he knows and what he does for the mayor. Now, Buck is we find a little of Buck's backstory too. Buck is sort of the cleanup guy after Wesley was killed, because, of course, Karen killed Wesley in a very famous scene and a famous incident. And the thing is, this is another thing where I go back to how Netflix would have handled this show, because Buck and, Daniel is there's like a bromance, but it's a very superficial thing in a way. We kind of know because we like the small hints. If it was on Netflix, there would be like 3 episodes of just Daniel and Buck doing work together. But here we get like 3 scenes. We get Heather tells Buck, "Oh, you really like this kid, don't you?" And he's like, "Yeah, he's a good kid," or whatever. Second thing is Buck is like taking Daniel out, because Daniel is like, they're pretty sure at that point. Buck and Fisk are kind of sure that Daniel's the one that's kind of running his mouth, and that's how their operations are being put in jeopardy. So Buck takes him out to the woods, and Daniel is sort of thinking he's the one that's going to wind up in a hole, but come to find out, Buck is sort of putting him through his paces so that he can help him, bury somebody else. And then finally, we see also earlier on in the season, this was probably the second one, was the hot dog scene where, Buck and Daniel are enjoying a hot dog. Like I said, that's kind of all you really needed to see to get these guys' relationship established. And I didn't mind that, but I kind of felt like I wanted more from the character of Daniel. And again, they're trying to thin the herd. We can't keep all these characters around forever. But Daniel was actually one of the more interesting ones to me. And so he tells BB to get on the bus, get out of town. Don't tell me where you're going, and just get out of town. And because he was about to turn her in to Buck to sort of find out what she knows and then dispose of her. And I think Daniel was sort of broken by having to bury the guy. And he you got to remember, he was a guy that was basically just trying to be an intern. He sort of had a hero worship for Fisk. He wanted to work for Fisk, and he wound up in the mafia. And that's honestly the truth. And so he, I think, doesn't really protect BB so much because of, again, like there's a love interest going on, but because he doesn't want to go out as a killer. He already made the first step, which is cleaning up after the murder. He doesn't want to be the guy that's going to have to be, Judas and send her to her death. Either that, or he was going to be the guy that was going to kill her himself. This wasn't going to go well for him, and he had to make a stand. And so he makes a stand for Buck, and he famously says, and I'll censor it, but he says, "F you, Buck." And I feel like that was a really strong statement. Now I'm going to go to what I didn't like now about the season, which the F-bombs are getting so ridiculous. There's like 80 F-bombs in an hour show. I mean, this is like bordering on what, like Scarface levels? Nobody really talks like that, I don't think, in real life. I mean, it's ridiculous. Now, if they had saved, like most movies or TV shows do, like if they saved their one F-bomb for where it will matter the most, that's where it should have been, right there. Because we're all cheering Daniel that he's not a rat, he's not a fink, he's not a Judas, and he just like tells off Buck. All right. Every other episode, though, had to have about 7 or 8, F-bombs, and it's ridiculous. And this is the same thing they're gonna do with Lanterns, which is its own kettle of fish. I'm not gonna get into that right now, but I wish that they would tone down the language on these things because it doesn't make it adult. I mean, I wouldn't even mind actually if a kid watched this because it is just like after a while, it's like saying cotton candy. If you say cotton candy 75 times, eventually that word loses its meaning. And that's kind of the reason why they have it in the show so much is because it's lost its meaning to a lot of people. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's got any potency, and it feels like if they had used it just in the scene, it would have been potent enough, but they don't. And so Buck ends up killing Daniel. And again, I said on Twitter, and I still feel kind of the same about this, but I'm disappointed. I didn't really feel what I was supposed to feel. I think you're supposed to feel a lot of intense regret. Eventually, they said that this was not the way it was originally going to go. Buck was going to let him go. But I don't feel like that's the way Buck plays. And so I think this was the right move because I don't think Buck would have let him go. Even though they were, friends and bros and whatever, he wasn't going to let him go. And he's too much of a made man that he wouldn't do that for Fisk. So, but I feel like they could have done the Rose storyline. I always saw Daniel as sort of being the Rose. I know the Rose, I think, was Kingpin's son in the comics, and he was like a guy trying to take over his father's business, and Kingpin didn't know. I feel like that was something that they could have done with Daniel. I think they tried to portray him as being a little too stupid, maybe, to do that. A little too naive, let's put it that way. But again, just to take a bullet to the head after all this, it just feels like an anticlimax to me. It didn't really feel like what we should have gotten. And again, BB is off. I guess she's going to survive and be back in the third season. And Buck, well, with Buck, we really don't know because with the siege on the Capitol where the Kingpin is, we see Buck get shot, and then the Kingpin locks down the Capitol or whatever, and Buck is in there bleeding out, and that's the last we see of him. Again, this show really cut a lot of extemporaneous footage, and I understand you want to keep the pace going, well, but there's a lot of times when you kind of feel like, why don't they let a scene breathe? And maybe they could do that a little bit better. Especially a lot of times, this is only an 8-episode season. A lot of times, I could have seen giving this show like 2 more episodes would have really rounded out a little bit better. Because before we get to the end here, the ending doesn't have the big Kingpin Daredevil fight. They do that like 3 episodes before the end. And it's finally a fight between them two that rivals the 2003 Ben Affleck, Michael Clark Duncan fight. That was a great fight. And this fight is about as good. They really do the action up. They really use the billy club and the hand-to-hand combat because both of them are like boxers, both Kingpin and Daredevil. And the show, the climax of that episode is basically a stalemate. You don't see what happens, and then the next episode, you never know how the fight ended. And it's kind of, again, like an anticlimax where you say, all right, they were going at it pretty tough, and then the episode ends. And then the next thing you know, well, Daredevil is one place, Kingpin's another. You don't really get an explanation. And maybe you don't need it, but I kind of feel cheated, and I don't know how that fight ended. And so, again, that's where we set up that Matt is like, look, you leave New York, I'll leave New York. And, that in order for New York to win, they both have to lose. That's basically what they're setting up. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of felt like it was sort of a cop-out the way they ended it, because it's like, all right, they both had to lose, but Matt is the one that's going to jail. And Fisk ultimately takes the deal, which is kind of out of character for him, although I know he had no other choice, really. I mean, it was either take the deal or go to jail. And I knew that the show was not going to put Fisk in jail again because he's already been in jail, like, what, in the 2nd season and I think part of the 3rd season. Is that what happened? So I knew he wasn't going to jail again. And he takes the deal, and so he's kind of out in the beach while Matt goes to jail. Now, of course, something we've gotten past here is that Karen gets arrested. She is on trial for being a vigilante, and Matt comes back out of nowhere because they're sort of, have you seen this man? Because Kingpin is not outing Matt as the Daredevil. So he does this whole thing. Have you seen this man? And so Matt finally shows up in court. It's a great scene. And I've been frank about the fact that I am not a fan of courtroom drama. That is not my bag. So whenever they do these courtroom scenes, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I get it. This is his daytime job. All right, I'll hang with it for an episode, but then after that, let's get back to swinging on rooftops. Well, since he wasn't a lawyer for the whole season, I was actually really, it did make the impression that they wanted. It really was a thrill to see him step into the courtroom again, do his thing on the stage. And Kingpin is on stand, and he's got to spar with Kingpin, so to speak. And so finally, Daredevil, I mean, Matt is like trying to build a case against the Kingpin, trying to show that the Daredevil is a hero. The Daredevil was the one that at the beginning of the show, when there was the submarine went down or whatever, he was there. And he's building this whole case against him in order to free Karen. And basically, he has to reveal his identity in front of everybody. Now, that is a big deal to me because there is only like two superheroes in Marvel that sort of are allowed to have a secret identity. One is Spider-Man, which his identity was revealed, and they went through great lengths and great pains to make sure everybody forgot it. And Daredevil, because Daredevil's the blind lawyer, and that's like a sort of mythic thing that everybody in Marvel sort of respects, that he's the blind lawyer, justice by day. If he doesn't get it by day, then by night he's going to prowl the rooftops and try to even the odds. And so to have him have to reveal his secret identity basically kills like part of that character. It removes part of that character that's integral to Daredevil. I think it's going to be funny to see how they get around this. Now, the problem being is that they're not going to go the mystic route. I don't think they're going to go with Doctor Strange trying to make everybody forget. The most they can do is maybe have, I think there's a storyline where while Matt's in jail, Danny Rand puts on the Daredevil costume and plays Daredevil so that there's plausible deniability, and eventually Matt is let out. And they could say that the little trick he does with a cane is just something he did. He got used to doing, and for luck, he did it, and whatever. I did hear somebody on Twitter say that, well, he takes his mask off in front of people in the rotunda there or whatever in the Capitol. Yeah, I can see how maybe that might look bad, but again, we're talking about a legality. I don't think that I don't know what it was, let's say 20, 30 people that were there probably got a good look at his face. And if they did get a good look at his face, they're not all going to be called in as witnesses. Nobody's really going to know what happened to those people that were in there. It's just something that you can sweep under the rug if you do that. If you do give them plausible deniability by saying somebody else is Daredevil, he's out there doing it, and it couldn't possibly be the blind lawyer. The AVTF guys probably won't buy that. And they're all in the same prison as Matt, setting up season 3. And some images have been released. We've seen Kingpin with a beard. He's sort of going off on his nomad quest, I guess. Matt is in jail, and it's anybody's bet how long he's going to be in jail. I hope he's not going to be in jail for the entire season. That means yet another entire season where Matt is not in costume, where he's not doing heroics. I mean, I'm sure he'll be in a jail fight, but I mean, I tune into Daredevil to see Daredevil, and this season was one of the few where we got a decent amount of Daredevil. I mean, they could have upped it a little bit. I will agree that if we didn't have as many characters to deal with, we would have a little more Daredevil. But we got enough Daredevil where I didn't feel cheated this time. First time since the second season where I felt that way. And that's a step in the right direction. And, of course, from media, we've also seen that Luke Cage is coming back. Mike Coulter. Danny Rand is coming back. Potentially as Iron Fist. Probably he's going to do that, as I said, about the Daredevil. Um, Jessica Jones will be back. We really didn't see too much more behind the scenes photos. I don't think Punisher is coming back. That's still up for debate. The Punisher One More Kill episode, movie, one shot, whatever you want to call it, came out. And I'll just tack this on as an addendum because I didn't really watch it. I mean, the way it started just didn't endear itself to me. I kind of noped out. But I think the best thing that you could do with the Punisher is what they're doing with him now is putting him up against Spider-Man, because the Punisher, I've said this about John Stewart as well. Punisher is like a straight man without a comic. He's not going to be as potent without someone to play off of. Spider-Man's a great character for him to play off of. Daredevil's a great character for him to play off of. By himself, he's just a killing machine and he's not that much fun. There's only so many times you can see him scream and get psychotic and just kill people. You know what I mean? There has to be some kind of storyline behind it. And I feel like they've already done whatever they were going to do with his storylines in the first 2 seasons of Punisher. Any other stuff requires another hero to sort of play off him. So that is probably about it. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Again, we've gone about an hour. That's what we usually do. And to give this one a ranking or a number, all the Daredevil seasons kind of cycle around 4 stars for me. And this one is really no different. I think this one was I described it as this online too. This was an emotionally exhausting season. That's why I said at the beginning, I really would like to get back into it and watch it again. And I kind of feel so tired, honestly, from this season. It was an emotionally exhausting season between Blake and Foggy and Matt and Karen and all the stuff going on. It just, again, I can't like give it 5 stars because it did feel kind of drama heavy still. That's what the Daredevil's always going to be. He's always going to be kind of drama heavy, not really action heavy. 5 stars would have to be a very action intense season. I don't know if they'll ever give us that, honestly, probably not. But I am going to give this one, I think, what I gave the first season, which is probably about 4.5 stars. I think I gave last season 4 stars. Since this season was a little bit better than last season, I'll say 4.5 stars. How's about that? 4.5 stars. I'll give it an A on a scale of, A to D or A to F. I'd say it was an A. It was an A season. Enough Daredevil. I liked the relationship with Karen. There was enough action. We got to see Foggy again. I'm beginning to think that he's not coming back. I thought that maybe they would bring him back. It doesn't look like it. I'm pretty sure he's not coming back. Bullseye was great. We see him. His fate, it seems like, is tied up with Mr. Charles. People are saying maybe that means he'll be on Thunderbolts. I want to see him more as a villain, though, than an anti-hero. He really is more of a villain. I don't really see that as something I want for the character, but we'll see what happens. And if you're looking at a 1 to 10, I would say maybe an 8.5. 8.5, maybe 9, but let's stick it with an 8.5. I think that's good enough. All right, so let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Let me know what you think about Daredevil Born Again Season 2. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Do you think that it could be improved in Season 3? Do you think it should go beyond Season 3? Should we get... I've heard suggestions that should be another arc of, 4, 5, and 6. That would probably be cool. A lot of people have been saying, could we bring on some more Daredevil villains? Now, they have villains for Daredevil. It's not like he doesn't have other villains besides Kingpin. A lot of people are getting Kingpin fatigue. And I understand that. I mean, I like Kingpin because every hero has to have an arch villain. And a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't want to see the Joker again. I don't want to see Lex Luthor again. I don't want to see... But you need to have the arch villain be a more or less constant in the lives of the hero. That doesn't mean being in every season, but we need to have sort of a through line where he is still around. I don't think you just kill him off and that's the end of Kingpin. But I mean, when you see the other villains, I mean, the Gladiator, they've done a little something with him in the first season. I don't think they did anything else with him after that. The owl, the suggestions that the son of the owl will come in. Hopefully, maybe they'll do that. I don't know. Still, man, they're never using the jester. They're never using, although that would be fun. And I always tell people that the reason why we have the show is because Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio are executive producers. You're not getting Vincent D'Onofrio out of the show. I mean, he's the reason why the show is still on. So you got to temper your expectations if you think he's not going to be in it. That's the reason why you got the show, because these guys care enough to be on the show, and they're not doing it without each other, I don't think. I mean, maybe D'Onofrio eventually will step aside and say, I think I've done everything I can with the character. But again, he deserves, a spot in the show. I think he deserves to stay in the show. So again, let me know what you think in the comments below. And until next we meet, this is Johnny Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and I'll be with you again real soon.